All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Yvette Seeley-Jones, and I'm a member of the Digital Learning Team with Anglophone School District West. Welcome to LEARNEast 2021, and we are in session C5, which is Outcome Tracking in PowerTeacher Pro. I'd like to welcome Mark Michaud as he's also a member of our Digital Learning Team with Anglophone West. Thanks for taking the time to share your experience and expertise with us. Just a reminder to check and make sure your mics are closed. You may leave your video on if you wish. And Mark and I just discussed about any questions. You can probably just open up your mic and ask them or type them into the chat box throughout the session. And we'll get started.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Yvette. Hi, everyone. I'd like to reiterate what Yvette just said in terms of questions. I think I do have a cold, so if my voice sounds a little bit rugged at times, it's just because I have a small cold. If you have any questions, just type them in the chat or turn your mic on and cut me off a little bit, because I know often questions with PowerTeacher Pro, timely questions help more than waiting until the end and when the idea is passed, because we're going to go over a few different things here. The name of the session is Outcome Tracking, and I want to show everyone how you can use PowerTeacher Pro to, see what you've covered in terms of outcomes, because the advantage of PowerTeacher Pro is that the outcomes are entered in PowerTeacher already for you. However, at the high school level, there are certain courses that there are no outcomes. So if there are any high school teachers here, I'll show you how you can quickly find out if they're in there or not. It is possible that there are courses that don't have the outcomes. So unfortunately for you, you wouldn't be able to use those features that we're going to be showing. K to 8, they're all there. You don't have to worry. If you teach a course that's K to 8, the outcomes are in PowerTeacher Pro. But at the high school level, I've been pushing for it. People higher up have been pushing for it. We've been trying to get the outcomes entered for all courses, but there are still a few that don't have them. If you're teaching one of the big three with science, math, or in English, of course your outcomes are there. But we'll take a look. We'll take a look in a bit to see. I'll show you how you can find out if they're there or not. I am going to turn my camera off, and I'm going to start sharing my screen. So Yvette, if you can confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see that. Thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, so first off, before we dive into PowerTeacher Pro, I just want to make everyone realize that PowerSchool over the summer received an upgrade. So the look and feel of it is very similar, but a little different. You'll see like there's logos up here now. It just has a different feel, but in terms of navigation, nothing has changed. Today's session is a good time to talk to you about a new report that came out this year. Actually, it came out at the end of the school year. I'm not sure everyone's aware, but when you log into PowerSchool in the teacher environment and your school is all set up here, if you look over here on the left and you click on NB reports, I want to show you a few reports before we dive into the outcome section. Under NB reports, we have 3 reports here that I'd like to get your attention to. There is the email address report, there's the student demographic information report, and there's the student usernames and default passwords. So the new one here is email address report. And a lot of teachers in the past were requesting student emails. And it was very frustrating that student emails weren't in groups of classes. Teams kind of had it, but it was a hit and miss. But the district EECD had someone work on a report. And if you click on email address report, you can now email your students or your parents or together, and you can target, if you want to, one class, all your classes, and it's very, very easy. So if you select, let's say I select my Math 5 class and I want to say I want to contact communication guy, the guardian priority would be your first guardian. If there's 2 parents, you can always click on 2. And when you select your class, if it's high school, you'd be selecting period 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're doing K to 8, you probably just select your homeroom. So when you select your class and you hit submit, now I'm in a testing environment, so I don't have populated information here, but in your case, you would have the class you selected, all their student names, and you would have all their emails, and you'd have the contact emails as well. So you can say from up above here, well, first of all, you can export this information to Excel for your keeping, but this is always available. So if you click on email students, this will open Outlook for you and will prepare your email. This will only work if you use Outlook. If you use Office.com Outlook, you would need to highlight your emails, copy them, and paste them. So at least you do have the opportunity now to email your parents and your students easily. This was not available before. This was something that we had fought for years because we felt that it was, I guess it only became important when COVID hit, because then they realized all the kids were emailing. So this is why this has been created. Another important one is at the beginning of the school year, the student demographic information. This is where you will get all your student phone numbers, emails, addresses. Like, again, I'm in a training environment, so the data that I have here is limited, but if you go into one of your classes and you hit student demographics for your specific class, you can print this off and you have at your fingertips all the information for all your students. And lastly, we have the student username and default passwords, which is good because, as you all know, students will most likely have lost them, not remembered them. The funny thing is that I work for, I have a lot of parents that come for help for me, and when I ask them, does your child know their username and password, they all do now. I think having been online learning last year, a lot of kids have learned their username and passwords by heart. So when you click on the class you want, you can export this to Excel or PDF. I would say to keep this safe because these passwords, these kids cannot change them. So if you look at this, if I take this Logan Halpine, for example, his username is here. Now, we all know that a student ends with, this is the username, but it's actually at nbss.nbed.nb.ca. This is the ending of all student usernames. So when you look at a username, you actually need to input this username, and then you need to put at nbss.nbed.nb.ca, and their password would be in this column right here. So you might want to print that off at the beginning of the year if you have students that have forgotten their passwords. The nice thing about West is that, unlike other districts, kids cannot change their password. So the password that you're going to see on your screen is their actual password. In other districts, they let kids change them, but then the kids lose their password or forget them, and the teachers cannot help them. So in West, to save time last year, we made the student passwords are set to, they cannot change. And before we dive,
Can I we have just a quick question here, Mark. You'll probably touch on it once you get in there.
Sure.
It said, last year the outcomes were there for high school English for full year courses only, but were not there for schools using the English A/B format. Has this been corrected?
Unfortunately, I doubt that has been corrected. These are new courses, A and B. I can't answer 100% sure because I haven't looked. I'm in a training environment right now. I'm assuming that if they're not there, it's on a list of priorities. But when it comes to trying to get movement at EECD, with COVID and all that, it seems everything's been going at a glacial speed. The thing is those courses, they took the full year course and they separated it into A and B. So basically they created these two new courses, and entering the outcomes is not something that takes a few seconds. There's actually quite a bit of work to do. And I have a feeling that entering those two courses wasn't really rushed, but that part of entering the outcomes is not something they had looked at. So once we dive into PowerTeacher Pro here in a few minutes, I will show you how to quickly know if the outcomes are there or not.
Okay, great, thanks.
I have a K-12 environment here in terms of participants, so there are certain things that I will cover. I'm going to try to cover only stuff that applies K-12. For example, I'm not going to be covering how to set up traditional grade calculations today. If someone wanted help with that, then you can contact me one-on-one later, but that's not something that applies to K-8. Before we dive into PowerTeacher Pro, the one last thing I want to show you is that the backpack here for all of your classes is where you can get individual student information. I often get teachers that they don't know how to print, per se, the report card of one student, especially K-8. So if I click on my math course here and I click on the backpack for that course, you will see your list of students here on the left-hand side. So when you select one of these students, whether, it doesn't matter who it is, you'll see a select screens. And all of these screens over here on the right-hand side, not all of them are pertinent, but some of them are. They all apply to this student, Lucas Hamilton. So for example, if this was end of November and a parent came in and you wanted to print a report card only for Lucas, you would click on the backpack and go to K-8 provincial report card. And then you would select the term and T1, and then you would hit submit. So anytime you want any information for a specific student, you click on the backpack, and all of these screens, you can cycle through them and see what information you want, especially if you want to get their schedule. If you're doing high school, you'll see their schedule and you can print that off. That is the best place to get single-handed student information, is through the backpack. Okay, so we're going to dive into outcome tracking. So for these purposes, I decided to use a Math 5 just because math is a nice, easy course to use for outcome tracking. Obviously, it doesn't matter what course you're teaching from K to 8 or even 9 to 12. Again, depending on the course. For the teacher that asked a question about the 9A and the 9B, I would say if you go into PowerTeacher Pro and you select your 9A class, okay, and you go to progress and you go to standards, if this page is empty, if there's nothing here, you do not have the standards entered yet for 9A and 9B. Another way to find out is if you click on assignment, as if you're creating an assignment, and you're in your 9A or 9B class, or any class for that matter for high school that want to find out if you have the standards there. If you click on the standards tab here and there's nothing here, even if you click show all, there's nothing here, that means the standards have not been entered. But as you can tell, for a K-8 class, they are all entered. So the reason the PowerTeacher Pro and outcome tracking is a tool that's available for free to all teachers. Now, is it the best tool? No, it's not, but I guess sometimes the best tool is the one that's made available to you. And the nice thing about PowerTeacher Pro is if you're teaching a course that has the outcomes, is that the outcomes are all entered. So like I said, if I look at progress and I look at standards, they are all here, okay? Now we need to take these gauges here with a grain of salt, and I'll explain a little bit later. But if you notice the assignment column here, you see the numbers? These are the number of times that you've actually entered something that had this outcome attached to the assignment. So for example, if I look at this assignment, like represent and describe whole numbers to 1 million, it's been checkmarked in an assignment 4 times. So if I click on the 4, I actually see the 4 times it's been checkmarked as a whole. So and I'll explain how this works here in a few minutes, but as a grade 5 math teacher, if I'm looking at my standards progress for the whole class, not per student, and I look over on the right-hand column, I can see which ones that, you know, maybe I haven't covered. And if I look at this, I mean, yeah, this one's not going to be covered because it's mathematics. But if you have some that are covered less than others. I'm going to go back to my assignment list. So when these are basically assignments. However, if you look at, I have what I did for categories. If I look at the math assignment, math outcomes, we have 4 of them for math, right? There's number, patterns and relations, shape and space, stats and probability. So what I did for report purposes under categories, I created 4 categories that are my strands. Okay, under each strand are the outcomes for each one. But the reason I did that, I'll explain it a little bit later, is because I want to attach my outcomes to a specific category that fits that strand. And that's for report purposes that I'll show here in a second. I have observations, conversations, and I have an assignments category. Tracking outcomes in PowerTeacher Pro is not going to give you the score for a kid. It's what it's meant for is if you want to take anecdotal notes, or you want to be able to keep track of what you've covered throughout the school year. If you enter information in PowerTeacher Pro, at a glance, it's easier for you to see what's going on. This is not going to, like at the high school level, this is not going to like take a bunch of numbers and average them out and give you a score. This is not what this is about. This is mostly about how you can keep track of your outcomes. So what I did, I created an assignment and I called it Outcome Tracking Summary. And what I did is when I created it, I attached all the outcomes. Okay, so how I did that, I went to assignment, I called it Outcome Tracking Summary. I put it in the observations category, and I made it a collected only, and then under standards, I attached them all. So what that does, when you hit save and close, this is my entire class. It's a small class, I know, but I have attached here to this all my outcomes for the entire class. Now, the thing is with this is that it's going to be, it depends on what teachers want to do. Like I attach them all, but then I realized like when I did this, there's a lot of outcomes. So I thought, well, maybe teachers will want to break them up. So I created an assignment where I only have the number outcomes. So right here, I only have number outcomes, and you can see in progress. So during the school year, when you cover these outcomes, you can easily enter, here's the thing, when you enter outcomes, the only scale you get is meeting, in progress, and not meeting. So I can say that this kid is meeting, this other kid is, actually I can fill it all in. So what happens is when you enter all of these, under reports, and there's a new feature here. If you call your report number, and you want to go see how your students are doing in your number outcomes, I want to make sure that my data is my assignment comments and my standard scores. So that's under data. And under categories, I only want to see the number category. And I'm going to hit run report. So the nice thing about reports this year, everyone, is that when you name your report title, it actually names it the actual name you call it. That did not work last year. It didn't matter if you renamed your report last year, it would I think it always said individual student report. Now it actually calls the report the name you changed it to. And the nice thing about that is because if you have all your reports here, if I open this up right now, it shows me the number report for this student. Well, actually all of them, right? So the thing I want to show you, see, I have the same assignment called represent whole numbers. If you put a score, we discourage putting in scores because it starts giving percentages to kids. What we try to tell teachers to do is like, you make them all collected only when you're tracking outcomes. So your flag is you've collected it, and then in your comment, you can say how the kid did if you want to, and you can say that he's meeting. But the nice thing about this is that if you add another, if I add another assignment, here's the nice thing about it. If I had another number assignment, so when I call it apply mental mathematics, and I put that in the number, and I give it, I always take out count and grade. I'll explain why here in a minute. And I want this to be collected only. So when I go to my assignment list and I go to apply mental mathematics, and I give, I can give my kids a score on this. I'll give them all meeting because they all did well. And you keep doing this throughout your semester or the school year. If you go back to your report at any time and you hit the little I button here, you can hit resubmit. So basically this is your report on your number category for outcomes. It's going to add this one thing. This seems to like lag and you can't do anything, but if you hit refresh, it fixes it right away. I noticed that yesterday. So when you hit the resubmit and you hit the number, you don't need to go back into your report and you don't need to come back in here and set everything for that report that you had made, because you're going to make different reports throughout the school year. So the nice thing is you can actually go into your queue and go to the report you want and resubmit it. So you'll see that, I've added the develop number sense, and it's right up here. Apply mental mathematics strategies and number properties such as skip, and he's meeting. Now, if you want to leave comments on that, you would come here and you can still leave targeted comments for each kid. And I want to remove, what I was trying to get to earlier is that this represent whole numbers, we don't recommend putting a point scale, because what happens is that it wants to get everything numbers. And if we look at the grade scale, in order for the scale of 1 to 4 plus to be entered, they give them percent values so they come in order, because these aren't really percentages. So a kid that gets higher than 0.45, it gives them a 4 plus. So that's why this kid has a 4 plus here. Even if this kid would have had like 1 out of 10, he probably still would have had 4 plus. So we've been telling teachers that want to use PowerTeacher Pro for outcome tracking to please make everything collected only. So if I remove this, I'll delete it. And then I'll go back to my reports here. And I'll run this number report again. It's really convenient that you can run reports now and you can target your names to what they are. You can have a Q1 progress report, Q2, Q3, Q4 for the high school. You can have a T1, T2, T3 at K to 8, and you do not have to rewrite them each time. You can just go back and find them and hit resubmit. So if I run this number one again, so this is what it's starting to look like. This is going to populate more and more as you enter these assignments for your assignment scores. Any questions so far?
None so far in the chat. Does anybody have any questions?
So what we're trying to avoid here by putting a score is getting the grade scale that's being converted automatically. So by putting collected only, we're only going to see anecdotal evidence in here. So the nice thing about having an assignments category is that you can run a report that has all the assignments that you've given. And from those assignments, you can then open up actually, I made a mistake here. I meant to put that in the assignments category. That's why that looked strange a while ago. So, and I want my reports, individual student report. I want this to be my assignments. That's why that was looking different. And I want to call this assignments. So you can use assignments category. And again, everything I'm suggesting here are just suggestions. Teachers may want to do things differently. The big advantage here is that in PowerTeacher Pro, all your outcomes have been entered, which is nice. And you can track what you're doing. So we're going to run this report and come take a look here and call assignments. Let's see how this should just have the 2. Yeah, this has the 2 assignments that I've given. And see, this one here, I added number, and this one I didn't. I guess it depends. I mean, as a teacher, you know that this N here represents the number strand. So what you can do, so this is represent whole numbers. If you want to make it cleaner, I can go to represent whole numbers. And, you know, I can remove the number, okay? I don't need that. I already know it's the number strand from the outcome, that's N1. So when you do a report, right, if I go back to my reports here and I run this assignments again, that number should be gone. Yeah, it's gone. So I have the assignments, apply mental mathematics, the kid is meeting. You can leave a targeted comment for that kid. Assignments, represent whole numbers. It's collected, very well done, he's meeting. So everything you've given to the class can be represented under here for all your students. Now, when it comes to report card time, or during the school year, here's I think the most powerful part is if you click on a student, and I'll click on Logan here, and you go to standards progress, you see everything for every outcome that you've given so far. And you can actually give these students a grade of how they're doing. Like, so if you look at the reason that under the standards. The reason that I do not put count and grade is because if you check mark count and grade, I'll show you what it does here. If you check mark that and you go to your students view and you go to standards progress, it gives them a score. I think it gives them the most recent one, but that should not get populated automatically. This is your judgment on if the kid is meeting, not meeting, or in progress for these strands. So I recommend that you leave all your strands, don't count final grade. You just want them to show up and that you give them a score. So when you do go to the student's view under standards progress, you're the one that's going to decide where they're at for these outcomes. Because remember, these scores up here are the scale 1, 2, 3, 4 plus, because these are the actual scores that go on the report card. Okay, you don't want you only populate this in November, but during the school year, these are the outcomes that you are covering. So for example, I want to know if I hover over this, it'll show me what that outcome is. It says represents and describe whole numbers to 1,000,000. You've covered that outcome according to this 3 times. So when you click on the 3, it actually opens it up and shows the 3 assignments that you gave and the scores they got. Now, actually, there's only 1 assignment here, and the other 2 are like outcome tracking. But if you had given the student 2 or 3 of these assignments, you would look at the scores for the green, and you could look over here on the right, and from that judgment, you can come back here and say, okay, Logan is definitely meeting that. And if you want to leave a comment, you can. Actually, you cannot leave a comment there. Sorry. You could leave the comment up here under number, but that goes on the report card. So I guess you would need to leave your comment under number outcomes. You would leave your comment in here. You can leave your comment right here. Again, this is all anecdotal evidence. This is like we're not setting this up to calculate your marks. And that goes for high school. Yes, high school, you guys are going to have scores here. That's, a percentage. If you want to attach your outcomes, so for example, if this was an actual high school assignment and I want to put it points and I want to say that, well, this was out of 45, you can, and you can attach your standards, okay? But what happens is when you attach the standards and you have a score, unfortunately, I'll show you what happens. So if I put 10, this is what we've been struggling with, is that if you put 10, I'll put save and close here. And was it this one here? No. If you put out of points and I give the kids here, if I give these kids all a 1, unfortunately, what it does is that you see it has these values for 4, 4, 3, see 0.45, which is the cutoff for 4 plus. So if I give these kids, I think a 5 out of 10, let's say, so they all get 50%. And I run the assignments category again, so I'll go back to my reports. And I run assignments. I love this feature that you can just resubmit now. See, it gives, the kid got a 50%, okay? But it gives a 4 plus, which it's not something you can give parents. The reason it does that is because in the mind of, PowerTeacher Pro, our scales, this is what the EEC has set it to. So that's why for outcome tracking purposes, again, I'll show it you here, 0.45 according to this is 4 plus, but the only reason they put these scores in here is so these numbers for that grade scale for the report card would show up in order. But what it's doing is doing this to the reports. So what Yvette and I have been encouraging teachers to do is use the collected only scale, which doesn't give a score.
So we have one question here, Mark, and Emily, he might have touched on this a bit for you. It says, she says, can we enter assignments, etc., to track outcomes and to calculate grades? And this is a high school class.
Yes, absolutely. So if you enter, the only thing is that you can all your assignments for high school, you can attach the outcomes that go with it. So when it comes time to look at what you've covered or what's if you go to a student and you go to the standards progress, you're going to see here how many you've covered. The thing is where the issue comes in is that when you run a report and you've done that, I would recommend you're going to see the scale here that attaches to this, which I basically means you don't run the report to show to parents because it's wrong. Because when we look at the if I change the scale here again to points, and we click on this, the issue is this, like 0.45 is 4+, and it gives it a 4+, even though the kid only had a 50. I mean, it's not. They still have the correct mark. If your traditional grade calculations are right, the kid still has the correct mark, but it just looks poorly on a report. I mean, if you don't run the reports and don't worry about it, you can still come to this progress, to the student standards progress, and see how they've done. So if you click on this 3, you'll see your 3 assignments with the scores they got, right? Which will. So if a kid comes to your desk and says, you know, why am I struggling? We'll say, well, this outcome you haven't done very well. But when it comes to reports, you would need to ignore this grade. Yvette and I have tried everything we can to turn off. Like, we would love to be able to get rid of this 4+ at the assignment level. This is at the outcome level. This meeting is fine. If we could get rid of this, just nothing show up here, it would be great. But we, unless Yvette has magician tricks since over the summer, that's the only downfall from adding outcomes to assignments for high school, is when you run a report, this shows up. If you don't worry about that and you don't run the report, yes, by all means, attach all your strands to all your assignments. Remember, the assignments is actual work that students did, okay? So it's some kind of assignment that you gave them, and you can enter what outcomes it covered. These here, like these patterns and relation outcomes, this here is if you want to come in and say, I guess there's only 2, and you want to put how the kids have done. Are there only 3? I guess there's only 2 outcomes for patterns and relations. You can actually put in and show how the kids did as a summary for all of them by your I guess your from all the evidence that the kids have passed in throughout the year. You can decide as a summary what their score is. You can do it here, or again, you can do it under the standard progress for T1, T2, and T3. These down here are the outcomes, but these up here, this is the space for the report cards. So this is your comment, because everyone's used to seeing this. Like, everyone goes to this window when you're entering report card information, but you can also do it on this window as well. I'm sorry for high school. High school is completely different because you guys are using traditional grade calculations. But yeah, so that's a way you can use this window. But I like the reports. I kind of like having the shape and space outcomes, because when you click on it, you can decide, okay, so today we covered S2. This is how I think, this is where my kids are at. And if you want to know how many times it's been covered, you would go to your standards progress. This is for the entire class. So if you look at this, demonstrate an understanding of a multiplication digit by 2-digit by 2-digit, you can see it's been covered twice. No scores have been given because there's nothing here. This one has 1 score entered. So if you look, this was out of 10. The student got a 5 out of 10, but it's giving a green light because of the grade scale I talked about earlier. I want to also emphasize that this is a lot of information in a short period of time. Yvette and I are both available for one-on-one after school, during the school time, for any questions, any support. We do staff training as well, but we're really trying to encourage teachers utilizing PowerTeacher Pro to try to at least help them with anecdotal notes of tracking their outcomes. So the big difference from this year, also, if you have reports that you've created that you don't like or you've changed, you can always delete them. That will get rid of them, but your reports will stay all year long. And also the reports apply to your different classes. I might be wrong. I just want to see here. Yes, your reports will stay. So if you create a Q1 report and you've set all your data, so if I go to reports and you set your report by the way you want it, and you call it like your Q1 if you're doing high school, right? Or if it's a T1 for middle, for K to 8, and you select your data and you say, I want my course grades and attendance, and I want my course grade comments, and your standard, and you also want your category totals, and you want to say, well, this is for my, you select Q1 or T1. When you okay, I have no kids in my homeroom, sorry. And once you've set that in your reports, it will stay there. And let's say next year at this time of year again, your Q1 report is set perfectly. You just come here and you hit resubmit for all your classes one at a time, which is, I think, is beneficial. Let's move over to categories for a second, because there's something I forgot to mention. If you're teaching, this is even more important for high school. If you notice, like the shape and space here, it applies to all classes. So I see a lot of this, and teachers often will put categories that look alike but are not quite the same. They'll use them for a class that it's not part of the traditional grade calculations. It's very important that the categories that you have set here are all applied to the classes that you use them for. So for example, shape and space here, all my classes are selected. It's pretty obvious that shape and space should only be used for math. It shouldn't be used for biology, English. I mean, if it's part of the foundation math, I mean, I have high school, this is all mixed up, but what I'm trying to say is that shape and space should only have listed the course that you actually use that category with, whether it's in your traditional grade calculations or part of your K to 8 outcome tracking. So all of these should look, so for example, so if I want to remove this, I want all of these The reason this is important is because it saves a lot of mistakes throughout the year. So now conversations, observations are going to be used in all your classes, so you can leave it there. So what that does is that when you hit an assignment under the class, when you hit select category, you're only going to see the categories that are pertinent to that specific class. If you leave them all wide open, for example, I've got some bunch of inactive ones down here, right? Because you can make, if you have a category you don't want to use, you just make it inactive. You can't delete it. You can make them inactive and they don't show up. But if I want to make this this test category show up, I'll make it active. It is showing for all classes. So if I go back to the assignment list, test is now here. It's right here. But maybe test is not part of this course. So I would say test is only part of this biology course. So when you're in your math course and you hit assignment, you'll only see oh, I have both selected. That wasn't supposed to show up. That confused me. So if I go to assignment list, I'm under my math course here. Test should no longer be there. Yeah, test is gone. The reason that's important, again, for if you're doing traditional grade calculations and you set your categories before your traditional grade calculations, when you start entering your categories, only the categories that are attached to your course will show up here. You don't need to select them. And so when you're attaching your assignments to your categories, you're using categories that are part of your traditional grade calculation. I've seen it so many times, teachers contact me saying, why are my marks wrong? Well, I'm saying, well, you have categories set up that that in your traditional grade calculations that are not being used in your assignment list. And they're like, well, because they'll have like, I come to their category sections and I'll see something called number and another category called numbers, right? They have it there twice and they're using the wrong one because everything here is set to all classes. So when it comes to categories, make sure they're set to the proper course.
Mark, we just have a conversation going on here with Dean about tracking outcomes at OHS. And Dean, do you want to talk to that a little bit? Just to share what you've been sharing here in our chat?
Yeah, I can. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah. Hi, Dean.
Okay, good. Hi. Yeah, no, at OHS last year, we've been using the 3P model for a while at the high school level, and we shifted into a strands-based marking environment last year. And as a team over the last couple of years, we've been toying around with the grade scale and trying to get on the English language arts side of things to get our curriculum, our provincial standards, and a grade scale that all sort of use the same language and communicate. And we've developed a grade scale that is basically like a 4-point scale if you want to think of it in those terms. But because of our report card, we kind of have to square peg, round hole everything into a 100-point scale, which really isn't the best way to assess language arts. Because really, when we're looking at outcomes like you've been pointing out, what's the difference really between an 88 and an 89 when it comes to a student? They're either appropriate or they're strong in whatever that skill is. So we've been trying to do our best at the high school level to communicate back to the students in the way that you're outlining here, but we're kind of hamstringed a little bit with the reporting at that level. So we're I know my team is really excited for sort of a different report card that would maybe do a better job at communicating how a student's actually doing rather than just a 2 or 3 digit number.
Dean, you are aware that there is a provincial board that have met all last year about the high school report card and outcomes.
Yes, I desperately tried to get myself in that room, but
I know, I
did
too.
Hear me anymore?
I did too. But I think there will be changes at the 9-10 level soon. I don't know, and I say soon. Remember, EECD and education is glacial speed, right? So. In terms of soon means they're talking about it, but I'm pretty sure 9 to 10 might be looking at something like we have K to 8. Right. 11, 12, getting away from numbers seems to be, there's more resistance there. But I mean, my presentation today is not for this to calculate any marks. I'm trying to show teachers how they can use what's given to them in terms of the outcomes being entered already in PowerTeacher Pro, and just give them an idea like where you can go to take a quick look and say, oh, I haven't covered that outcome enough, I don't think, because you can see it right on the screen, right?
Exactly, yeah. And that's what we've been doing. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. So that's what I was just going to say, but it's not going to come up with your grade for you is what I'm trying to.
No, and that's like, I mean, for the most part, we've been looking at doing a lot of like workshop model type of stuff. So everything that I usually put in PowerSchool is collected only with the exception of a few anchor pieces that I would select and have the students select what pieces are going to stand for their outcomes, almost as like a proof of them achieving those different outcomes. So we've been able to manage it within PowerSchool in a way, but that's why I was asking sort of the questions about the 4-point scale, because that would sort of lend itself better to what we're using right now as a grade scale rather than a met or not met. So I think, it would just be, I'm looking at how it's set up right now going, geez, if they had some of those other tools.
Let me show you something. The met or not met is at the outcome level.
Right.
If you put in this, if you attach a strand, you can actually put in the scale. So you probably know this already. So if I go to standards and I say, well, this is a number. So this when you check mark number, Dean and other teachers, you can, this at the assignment level will let you enter the scale. The thing is that if you actually attach a point scale also, that's what the problem is with the 0.45 is 4+, which doesn't make any sense. Right. So that's why we encourage the collected only. But if you say number and you say, okay, I'm covering N4, and so this is a test, and I'll put this into the observations, and I'll say this is collected only, and I'll save and close. See, if I look at the test here, the strand level lets you put in that scale. So if you want to enter the scale that you think that student achieved on that specific assignment every time, you can. So I can say the kid had a 3+ here, and obviously a 3+ or a 3+ is meeting, right? And you can say I collected that. And if you want to put some notes in there and what the assignment was or how much you got it out of 50 or whatever it was, you can. And so if I hit, I just want to see what that would look like in terms of, oops. And I'll put 3 across, and I'll put meeting across. But my point is this scale here, Dean, this meeting in progress and not meeting, is only for outcomes. If you attach the strand, you can put in the scale. So,
and we would normally work with more specific outcomes, so that's probably why I haven't seen that before.
Right,
so that
right.
makes a lot of sense.
But you can attach both, right? So if I went into reports, and with this, I put this in observation. So if I go into reports and I go into visual student report, and I keep the same type of report here, and I want to have this, I want to get rid of assignments. I want to go, again, people, the reason it's important to try to have as many categories to fit outcomes as possible is that you can then filter your results in terms of how kids are doing specifically. That's why I like to have this filter here. And so if I go to data, I want, here, I don't want all of this. I just want standard final grades, assignments, standard scores. I don't need category totals. And I'll call this observation. The new feature for the report queue is really nice. Having actually the names change and having be able to resubmit them is going to be, I think teachers are going to be able to utilize that a ton. So if I look at this, this is heavy because I have this outcome tracking. I'm going to change the category of that. I'm going to run that report again. Why is it attaching them all? So you look at the number it gives out the kid, the 3+. Oh, I've the data is important. So standard scores, category total, standard final. Okay, so that's what I don't want. I don't want final grades. I just want the assignment, comments, and standard scores. Okay. Run report. And running reports, you'll see everyone, there's always finicking to find out what these check marks do and not do by, you know, then good thing you're not wasting paper. Okay, so see with the collect and only, Dean, you can put in, if you have a bunch of assignments here, you can attach if you attach the strand right here, you can give it the scale. I'm just saying that that's possible. The meeting, not meeting in progress is at the outcome level. I mean, I kind of understand what it means, but like meeting just means that they understand that outcome, right? At least here you can say like if they understand it, but at what level do they understand it?
And I guess that's what we were itchy for, was to have a little bit more leeway in that. So that's perfect. Because like I said, we usually separate the outcomes we're looking at by quarter.
Right.
So we were always really dealing with sort of more specific outcomes. We never thought to put in the strand because it didn't give us the ability.
Exactly. Put in the strand. Yep.
But putting both in makes tons of sense.
And the thing is, and the reason we've been avoiding Yvette and I, like let's say the kid had done 8 out of 10 up here. Well, the thing is let's say the kid had done 5 out of 10. Well, the grade up here above would have been 4+, which is what we don't want to see, right? So that's why, like you've been doing it properly, you just make everything collected only. Unless you're in traditional grade calculations, it's something that counts towards the grade for percentages, depending on what course it is. But if you're doing an anecdotal evidence and you're collecting stuff, you make it collected only, you give the kids a score. The nice thing about it is then when you go to the students and you go to standard progress, you can see like how many times all these outcomes have been covered, and you can see what scores they got by clicking. The scores would populate here, right? You could see all the assignments for that specific outcome and the scores they got in terms of meeting, not meeting, or in progress. And you know, with your professional judgment, Dean, little Julie comes up and you look at the outcomes and her scores, you know pretty well what you're going to populate in terms of the report card up here. You know what I mean? Like, at least you have all this evidence below to look at when you're doing your report cards here above. So, Dean, this doesn't relate to you because this is K to 8, but you know what I mean in terms of.
I do, yeah. And I think it was really helpful for me at the high school level because I taught a grade 12 class, so all those outcomes were in there for me, but the rest of the school all switched to the AB model, so they didn't have access to this.
That's, I know.
While I was doing some of this stuff and toying around with it last year, almost as a pilot, I was talking to some of my colleagues about it, and they're like, how come we don't have that? And I'm like, well, you should. And then that's why I was asking.
I'm going to take note of it. I'm going to bug Alistair again. So A, B, English.
It's the same outcome, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that saves any work.
It doesn't save any work. It's the same outcomes. They just need to be re-entered. I guess it needs to be done at AACD. It's the database. Anyway, it should be a priority. In my mind, every single course should have those outcomes entered.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Any more questions?
I think that's it in our chat, Mark. Please remember to reach out if you need any help or support with anything. Don't hesitate to reach out to Mark or myself. It's 2:28. That concludes today's session. And on behalf of LearnEast and our participants, I want to thank Mark Michaud for taking the time to share with us today. Just a reminder to everyone to please click on the link in the chat to be eligible to win one of the several door prizes at this afternoon's closing session. Join us at 3:45 to find out if you will be a lucky winner. Thanks again, everybody, and I'll stop recording.
Good luck, everyone, with the prizes.